Hi there. I was
Hey.
looking to clarify some of your views on the flood and possibly debate you.
There you go.
Okay.
So do you think that, so you say that it's a global flood. Do you think that it killed everybody?
I mean, I think we're intended to think that. I mean, unless there was something that we're just simply not told. I think the text gives us the impression that everybody but Noah's family.
Yeah, so, I mean, I get your point that every myth has the story, but if you think of even like Native American myths, in order for that to be a myth, it would have to have survivors, in the culture.
But the point of our view of how that happens is that when Noah's sons repopulate the earth, we find out very early in Genesis that Noah's sons already, engage in quite a bit of wickedness. So what happens is, as the earth begins to repopulate, you get this idea that the nations fall back into all the same problems that they were already involved in with idolatry. So in other words, that seed story immediately gets tainted with false revelation. And that's why we would say that pretty much, I'll give you an example. I did a talk specifically on this topic of what's true in ancient religions from Genesis forward. So in other words, we have divine revelation, and we would say in scripture that kind of looks back at the, ancient world and the pre-flood, pre-diluvian world. But there were civilizations and cultures after the flood that would have maintained this sort of basic body of knowledge that they had of, okay, yeah, my descendant, Noah, my great granddad Noah, he was with the family in the boat, and they made it through the great deluge, and then the gods came down and helped, right? So in other words, it's the post-Noahic descendants that would have tainted the mythology, tainted the story with mythology. And it's not just the flood that shows us that. Or he left. Okay, it's not just a flood that shows us that. If you look at this interview that I did with Seraphim Hamilton some years ago, we actually got into how even pagan religions or world religions, like even some of them maintain, and I don't mean this in a zeitgeist type of sense, but I'm saying like they have seeds of truth, right? They have the seeds of the original, two man and woman. They have the seeds of, some of these Genesis stories in a very corrupted, paganized way. And the answer to that is that, yes, the descendants of Noah that had that then fell back into idolatry and sort of mixed up the stories with superstition. That's
whether or not it's global or local doesn't really change anything in orthodoxy, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't say it was local and it wasn't global. Like, that's what science came out with. It wouldn't really change anything in orthodoxy. There's a good book on how they line up with that. It's called Navigating Genesis by Hugh Ross. He's an astrophysicist who goes into how it can be either local or global, and it wouldn't matter either way.
Yeah, I remember reading that book years ago. I've read other Hugh Ross books. My one criticism of Hugh Ross is, he's a theistic evolutionist, which I would be critical of that perspective. But I think, I mean, even if conceivably it was local, would that necessarily be a problem? I don't think so, but I'd have to think on it more. But